Air never moves in a straight line. We love to think about our thoughts. We love to talk about what we think about our thoughts. Weirdo alien. I love it. Let's not end on death, let's end on the Fool. Hello everybody, it's Sylvie. Welcome or welcome back to Tarot Magpie. I hope you're doing all kinds of good. Today I'm super excited, I'm not gonna lie. I'm in the best mood. I am living in my new place up in Scotland with my partner. I'm all set up in my new office space. I've got loads of gorgeous natural light coming in, so hopefully the video is going to look really good. This is a very echoey room, so I do have a new mic set up. I'm hoping that that resolves that issue, but please bear with me for the first, I don't know, few videos that I'm filming and editing with this setup to get everything just right. And also it's Gemini season, so happy birthday to all the Geminis out there. I'm not a Gemini, I'm a Libra, but I love being in an air sign. I'm a very airy bitch. My mum was a Gemini, I'm a Libra, my sister is a Libra, so I grew up in a very airy household, and Gemini season just feels really good. It also doesn't hurt the fact that it's May, June, so the sun is coming out, the days are getting longer, the days are getting warmer. Long story short, I'm feeling fantastic. I hope you are too. And I hope that you are looking forward to today's video, which is my airy decks for Gemini season, Libra season, Aquarius season, any season. These are the decks in my collection that I feel like have kind of an airy vibe, the air signs being the thinkers and communicators, the intellectuals of the zodiac. I feel like the air signs lead with their head rather than their hearts and their feelings. I think we're definitely the signs in the zodiac that can come across a little bit more cold and uptight. We've got resting bitch face, but like an aura, resting bitch aura, is that a thing? I feel like that's most likely to be an air sign. But on the flip side, prone to daydreamy fantasies, and we love to think. We love to think about our thoughts. We love to talk about what we think about our thoughts. It's a very wordy, verbal time. Obviously, take this all with a massive pinch of salt. This is mostly for fun. With all that said, I'm going to get into the decks. I'm going to explain to you why they feel airy to me. So in no particular order. First up, we have what was the most obvious one for me. I already kind of previewed this in my earthy deck so that I did in Taurus season, because Taurus ruled by Venus. I picked the Goddess of Love Tarot. Libra also ruled by Venus, and I feel like the Tarot of Aphrodite is a much more Libran deck. Librans, we love beauty, we love aesthetics, and this deck just like has it in spades. Like, look at this Queen of Wands, isn't that so perfect? This deck also renames, like, we've got Aries instead of the Emperor. It renames the court positions, so we have Princess, I think must be Page. We've still got Queen. Do you know what? I don't remember. It's been a minute since I grabbed this deck. I love the Birth instead of the Fool, the Birth of Venus. This is gorgeous. Have I distracted myself from my own thoughts? Yeah. Priestess. Okay, so I think Priestess is instead of Knight. So we have Princess, Priestess, Queen, and then King. This deck, very beautiful. And I think the fact that this is a curated collection of, you know, pre-existing artwork, I think that feels very Libran to me, because it speaks to my personal love of curating and collecting and bringing things together on a theme. And this deck just absolutely nailed that. So this feels personally very Libran, because this is exactly kind of my vibe, the way that it's collected and curated on the theme of Aphrodite to fit with the tarot. I love this King of Wands too. I just love this deck. I think the selections were all really good. This is the first edition. I know there's been a second edition and there were some changes that were made. And personally, I'm really glad that I have this edition, because I think it nails it a little bit more. But all that being said, this is a Tarot of Aphrodite, and this is my first airy deck. Specifically, this is a very Libran deck, in my opinion. Okay, next up, Dreams of Gaia. And this specifically feels quite Aquarian to me, because I know Gaia is like Earth. It's a very naturey tarot, so that was maybe my initial thought. This is still in order because I still have not worked with it. But like I said, Gaia, my initial thought was Earth. Like Gaia in this context is very kind of new agey. It feels a little bit like Age of Aquarius rather than just like Mother Nature. And so in that sense, this feels much more Aquarian and much more airy. Like I kind of said earlier, I think air signs can be prone to fantasizing. And I think that's what this deck is doing. It's that dreamy fantasy kind of quality, but to my mind in a different way to like Pisces, which is the other very dreamy sign. I can't wait to do the water decks, by the way, in Cancer season. I'm excited for that. This deck just feels very Aquarian. It feels quite out there. It feels quite new agey. This deck plays with the system of tarot. Like once we get through the majors, you can see we've got extra major numbers, and also the majors have all been renamed, and we've got suits of the elements that we're used to, and some of them feel like this feels quite like a Two of Swords, that duality, but some of them feel removed from a more traditional tarot system. So I feel like it's kind of out there, it's doing its own thing, it's like pushing boundaries a little bit. So on that note, it feels more airy as well. I think it's so pretty. I think the art in this is honestly kind of cheesy, but I honestly love it, so I'm not mad about it. But yeah, that is the Dreams of Gaia tarot, which I feel is quite Aquarian. Let me know if you agree. All right, the next few, I'm going to be honest, are kind of vibes only, so stick with me. But first up, the Tarot Nuage, which translates to clouds. So that was my first thought. But there is something about this that feels airy. Like I said, I think, oh wow, the devil on top. Love that. And then the tower at the bottom of the deck. Okay, you couldn't make this up. I don't know what this deck is trying to tell me, but I don't think I'm very happy about it. Anyway, let's zoom us in. So like I said, I think air signs can often come across as a little bit analytical, a little bit unfeeling, a little bit spiky, and this artistically definitely a spiky deck. This deck is quite stark as a reader. It's not visually, it's not overly decorated with symbolism. The art style is quite detailed. Like there's a lot of, like in the line work, it's quite detailed artwork, but there's not a lot of additional symbolism or illustration. Like the Seven of Cups is a very straightforward Seven of Cups. Strength is definitely stylized, but it's a strength card. It's quite a stark reader. There's not a lot of like frills and fluff. And so in that sense, it's quite a straight talker in my experience. And I do think that really fits the like intellectual head over heart aspect of air signs. It gives you the facts. It's not trying to sway you in any particular direction. Like I pull a card and I'm like, okay, that's a Nine of Wands, that's a Nine of Swords. They're very, some of them especially, like this Nine of Swords, I think is extremely evocative of the Nine of Swords card meaning, as opposed to something like the Dreams of Gaia, which is very much doing its own thing, taking its own direction. I think the Tarot Nuage is like, you are asking a question, this is the answer, do with that information what you will. And I think that's also quite airy. So that is the Tarot Nuage. The Zeke's Arcana, also kind of based on vibes only. I simply had to run with the kind of weirdo alien association that Aquarians often get, because like this is such an alien vibes kind of deck. And purely that was it. I'm not gonna lie, I was just like, aesthetically, this feels like an Aquarian kind of deck. Yes, it's a bit stereotyped, but you know, I'm having fun here. This isn't that serious. So based on that, I was like, this is an Aquarian straight up. It's kind of aliens and a bit weird. And I think I'm just talking for the sake of talking at this point because I want to keep showing you the cards. I do like that it's a bit more pippish. Like you can read it in a similar way to the Tarot Nuage because it's a bit more pippish. It's a bit like, right, here's the facts. They're dressed up in this kind of futuristic alien magical girl, but also nostalgic with the troll dolls. But it's a tarot deck again. It's not, I don't think it's trying to sway you with a particular theme or a particular, it's not trying to make you feel a certain way about any of the cards. I don't feel like this deck has an agenda. it's just giving me the information in a very fun outfit. So that is the Zeke's Arcana. Oh, who did I leave behind? I left the star behind. Okay, that is much nicer than the tower and the devil that jumped out from the Tarot Nuage. Okay, next. This isn't one I can articulate, but the Heart and Hands Tarot. This feels Gemini. I'm really not sure why it feels like a kind of Gemini deck. I don't know if it's just the vibes I've had from the deck. The readings I've done with this, I think it just has the vibe of being quite Gemini. It's a bit fun, it's a bit chatty, but not chatty. I just feel like it has a lot to say if I want to read into it. I've got to say, I really like the court cards. I like how a lot of them have been, like, where did we have the Princess of Wands and the Princess of Cups? They've been reimagined visually as actually like doing something. They are not just standing there holding their suits symbol. They are like partaking in an action. They are, I think all of them are like creating something. Here we're writing, here we are, I don't even know what we're doing, some kind of ritual maybe, but like it feels more active. And Gemini being mutable, there's a lot of like energy there. Gemini being Mercury also, I just feel like there's a lot of movement. It's quite like an active sign, but not in the same way as something like Aries, which is very like go and like bursting forth. Gemini is just like, Gemini's flitting about, trying different things, doing different things, having a million different conversations at once and a million different like thoughts and ideas at once. Gemini especially is very much, I feel like Gemini loves a contradiction or a duality or a paradox or something that's like in opposition and loves digging into that. And that's just the energy that I get with this deck. Maybe also something to do with the black and white and the like stark duality of the color palette. I don't know if that's something. Like here our Queen of Wands. It's a very personable deck, despite the only figures being in the court cards and some of the majors. It's called the Heart and Hands deck. Most of the like minors is just objects and hands. It's a lot of cups, it's a lot of swords. There's not really people in the minor cards so much. So yeah, that doesn't particularly relate to its airiness. That's just an interesting facet of the artwork. But yeah, I'd like the Geminis out there to explain this one to me. Do you get what I'm saying? Do you agree? Do you disagree? I'm intrigued. And then here we go. Here's the Lovers. Here's the Gemini card. So I think we'll finish there. I haven't yet picked my deck for my daily draw for Gemini season, and I'm kind of thinking maybe the Heart and Hands because it feels right. And then if I work with it for, you know, the month of Gemini season, then I can at the end decide if I was right and decide what it is about this deck that feels so Gemini. That might be cool. Okay, the next two are kind of occupying a similar space in my brain. These are vibes only. I'll start with the Wayhome Tarot, which specifically feels like it's got Libra energy. I'm pulling this out and I'm like, did I pick this for a different element? And I don't think I did. There's something about this that feels Libran, and I could not tell you for why, but it does. This is, there we go, Father of Swords, Area of Air with the wind turbines. I love that. But this feels airy from a visual artistic standpoint because it's a very like spacious deck. There's a lot of landscape. There's not a lot of people. There's not any people. Even the court cards, they're not people. They are human-shaped outlines with a representation of the element. I love mountains for the King of Pentacles. That is one of my like personal associations in my brain. I think of the King of Pentacles as a mountain. It's got a lot of spaciousness. It's got a lot of room to breathe. It's got a lot of room to like explore. It's not telling you the answers. It's just giving you a way to find the answers for yourself, which feels very airy. And I feel like, especially this feels Libran, something about this deck feels kind of balanced, or it feels like it's easy to find some balance with this deck. I don't know if that is just inspired by one particular reading I recently did with this deck where the theme was just duality of the 3 cards that I pulled. So maybe that's just sticky in my brain, but yeah, there is something spacious and balanced about this deck. So this particularly feels quite Libran to me, but in general, this feels like a very airy deck. Although this is my favourite card in the deck, and it's the 9 of Pentacles. So, Wayhome Tarot. The New Chapter Tarot is on this list for similar aesthetic reasons to the Wayhome, because it's spacious. Even though it's got less like actual white space than the Wayhome Tarot does, it's got more figures. I still feel like there's a lot of room in this deck. And then also something about the kind of the shapes and the geometry and the symmetry, like it's got a lot of visual balance and it's visually been divided up and organized. That feels quite airy. That like, it feels like a more analytical way to present the artwork. And maybe that's a bit of a basic, obvious interpretation, but it's what I've got, so but in a similar way, it has a kind of similar feel to the Thoth, but I wouldn't call the Thoth an air deck. So it's not exclusively like a geometry, visual organizing of space kind of thing, because if that were the case, then every single Marseille deck would probably count, and I don't feel that way. It is something about this deck in particular. I think also again, aesthetically, the watercolor backgrounds feels very airy, because you can't contain air. Watercolor is quite an unpredictable medium to work with. It's got a lot of flow, it's got a lot of movement. Air has an awful lot of flow and an awful lot of movement. It will go where it wants to go. Air of Air, King of Swords. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous card. Ace of Swords, gorgeous card. I love all the representations of, like, we've got the clouds and the sky. This looks airy. I don't know what this is. I should read the guidebook, but it's gorgeous. It looks airy. Even though there are a lot of people in this deck, I don't feel like they are people. They're just kind of representations. Let's not end on death, let's end on the Fool. This is the New Chapter Tarot. I love this deck, I need to pull it out more. I say that about all of my decks. Okay, Raven's Dream. This was another one where I was like, does this feel airy or does this feel Pisces? Unsure, still not decided, but maybe I'll talk about it in both. But anyway, I am pulling this out as an airy deck because of the dreaminess. It's, you know, it's called the Raven's Dream Tarot, and the guidebook describes the dream that each card represents and what it kind of teaches the Raven as we follow it through the deck. This approaches a lot of the card meanings. I mean, this 5 of Wands looks quite straightforward, but some of them, I look at the card illustration and I'm like, I don't immediately get it as a representation of the card meaning, because it does not directly reference, like for instance, the Rider-Waite-Smith image. A lot of them do, but a lot of them don't. But then when you go into the guidebook and you read the description of the dream and what it's kind of teaching the Raven, it makes total sense. And I'm like, oh yeah, no, that absolutely does make sense as an 8 of Swords or a devil or whatever, once I understand where it's coming from. And that kind of approaching the same conclusion from a totally different route, that feels very airy. That feels like thinking for the sake of thinking and wandering to the conclusion in a different way for the sake of doing so. And maybe it's just me and the air signs that I know and love and talk to, but that's airy as fuck. That, like, yeah, thinking for the sake of thinking, for the sake of, even if you're going the same place, for the sake of like finding a different way to get there and just seeing what that brings up, that feels really airy. And that feels like exactly what this deck is doing. Is the meaning is still the Rider-Waite-Smith meaning. And when you read the guidebook, it still makes total sense how the story describes that meaning, but it's a completely different route to get there. I'm pausing here because this is one of my favorite Queen of Swords cards of all time. The way she's overlooking the maze and kind of overseeing everything and not getting all tangled up, but still understanding. Like, if we think of the maze as like the watery emotional feelings kind of element of the Queen of Swords, I love it. I think I've said what I wanted to say about this. I'm now just flipping through because it's stunning. But yeah, the way this deck approaches the meanings feels very airy. It feels like exploring for the sake of exploring, and like a thought experiment for the sake of a thought experiment. So, Raven's Dream. And then finally, I've got the Shadowscapes Tarot, and this one largely based on vibes and the artwork. The artwork is just very flowy and floaty. That's air. You can't contain air. You can't see its boundaries or its borders. And air can be very subtle or air can be very strong. And something about this artwork just feels very airy. And as I'm describing these, I'm wondering how I'm going to like verbally differentiate between air and water, which, like I said, is the next one coming up. Love all these butterflies. Because, you know, water also flows, but water has more direction to it, or if not direction to it, water is more easily directed, whereas air never moves in a straight line. Water will follow gravity, for instance. So the kind of looser, floatier nature of this deck makes it feel more air than more water. And again, we've got all this like watercolor background, which again, I'm like, that should be like a water representation, but I'm taking that too literally because, like I said, in, who was it? The new chapter, right? I was talking about watercolors. Watercolors are a very difficult medium to control, or can be a very difficult medium to control if you're me and you're not like trained in watercolor. It can have quite unpredictable results, which is one of the fun things about working with it, and I think feels more airy because, like I say, you can kind of direct water. You can't really direct air, and you can't see air. You can't see, it has no boundaries. You can't see where it mingles with something else. It's much more free flowing and much more, you've just kind of got to let it, or just accept that it will do its thing. And that is sort of the energy I get from the artwork of this deck. In terms of meaning, it's a pretty straightforward Rider-Waite-Smith. Nothing wrong with that. But yeah, artistically, this is such an air deck. Oh, I don't want to leave the video on the Nine of Swords. 10 of Cups, much nicer. Okay, that is everything. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 decks that I had to share with you today that feel airy, either tied to a particular sign in my mind or just the vibes. So I hope you've enjoyed. Let me know what your airy decks are. Let me know if you agree with me. Which one was it? Yeah, if you're a Gemini or if you just have thoughts, let me know what you think about the Heart and Hands, because it feels like a Gemini deck, but I can't quite articulate why yet. So that'll be interesting. But that's it from me. I'll let you go. Thank you so much for spending some time with me. I really hope you've enjoyed. Give me a like if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.